Tonight, taken hostage, Islamic State jihadists capture a pilot from a downed Jordanian fighter jet. Shots fired, a Gold Coast siege ends with a man being charged with attempted murder after an 8-hour standoff with police. After a month marked by tragedies, Christmas 2014 arrives with messages of peace and hope.
There you go. Merry Christmas.
And getting into the festive spirit, overseas crews party ahead of the Sydney to Hobart yacht race. Good evening, Jeremy Fernandez with ABC News. Islamic State fighters have captured a Jordanian pilot after his warplane crashed on a mission in northern Syria. IS militants claim they targeted the F-16 jet, but the US says that was not the cause of the crash. Middle East correspondent Matt Brown with this report.
They're images none of the nations fighting Islamic State want to see, one of their own in the hands of the militants. The photos released on social media by Islamic State appear to show the pilot being dragged from the water where his plane came down. In Jordan, a news report carried a sombre announcement by the country's military confirming his capture. It accused Islamic State of carrying out murder and mayhem in Iraq and Syria and said it held the militants fully responsible for the pilot's life. He's been identified as First Lieutenant Muaz al-Qasasba from the Jordanian town of Al-Karak. He reportedly comes from a well-known family, and there's great concern for his welfare among friends and the local community.
We are asking our king to save Muaz, to rescue him by any means. Muaz is one of those that we hold dear. The whole tribe of Al-Karak and Jordan cherish him.
Jordanian and US officials also dispute the IS claim that it shot al-Qasasba's plane down. They concede his F-16 came down somewhere in the northeastern province of Raqqa, but say there's no evidence the militants were responsible. The UN is urging the group to treat him humanely.
The Secretary-General calls on his captors to treat the pilot in accordance with international humanitarian law.
Al-Qasasba's believed to be the first military member of a coalition force to be held by Islamic State since airstrikes began in August. Matt Brown, ABC News.
Protests have broken out in the US state of Missouri after another black teenager was shot dead by a white police officer. More than 100 people gathered at the scene in Berkeley, just a few kilometres from Ferguson, where 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed in August. Some protesters tried to set fire to a petrol station and others set off firecrackers. The Mayor of Berkeley has called for calm and says comparisons to the incident in Ferguson are unhelpful.
We have a majority of black officers in our city, okay? The mayor is black, city manager is black, the finance director is black, the police chief is black. In a city that's 85% black, we have a majority police department, okay? So our experience is different.
Local officials say surveillance footage shows the teenager pointing a loaded gun at the officer who shot him. December has been a tough month for many Australians, from the siege in Sydney to the deaths of 8 children in Cairns. What's meant to be a joyous period has been often marked by sadness. But today, millions of people came together to give thanks.
Christmas Mass at Sydney's St Mary's Cathedral took on special significance this year. There were prayers for the world, but also for those who've suffered close to home.
And where some of this trouble has even come to our shores, indeed to a block or two away at Martin Place.
The tragedy was at the forefront of many churchgoers' minds.
Giving thanks and just joyful to be alive and to think about the loved ones that we've lost.
At Brisbane's St John's Cathedral, the congregation was urged not to be discouraged by the recent troubles in the world. At Melbourne's St Paul's, there was a similar message.
And know too that ultimately the power of evil is broken and that its sway on earth is under the certain judgment of God.
But while church offered a chance for contemplation, there was also cause for celebration. At Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital, Santa didn't come empty-handed.
Oh, look, there you go. Merry Christmas.
With the assistance of some very little helpers, he made his way to hospitals across Australia, bringing joy where it's sometimes hard to find.
Do you think you could take care of him? Yeah. Bless you, Richard. Well done, you.
That generous spirit was on display in Adelaide too. It's rare enough to find a cafe that's open on Christmas, let alone one that's giving the good stuff away.
And all we ask for in return is to put a small donation into one of the charities, and this year we chose a Palestinian Children's Relief Fund.
Relief's required at home too, and some of the nation's political leaders did their bit to help those without homes or families to turn to.
It's good for people that don't have anybody, at least it gives them somewhere to come, be loved, and have a nice festive lunch.
A big Christmas spread isn't just for humans. These animals at Werribee Zoo wasted no time tucking into lunch. Others ditched the dining for a dip. Perth's Cottesloe Beach was the perfect place to get that Australian Christmas experience.
Well, obviously we're Irish only here a year, so for us it's a completely new experience, and why wouldn't you want to come down to the beach when the weather's like this?
The lifesavers at Bondi were asking the same question.
We are the mecca for tourists around the world. They want to spend a sunshiny, bright Christmas, and we're better to do it than Bondi Beach.
And on a day like today, it'd be a Christmas to write home about. Nick Dole, ABC.
More than 2,000 Australian servicemen and women are spending Christmas Day away from home. They're deployed in operations across the globe, including difficult and dangerous work in Iraq. Andrew Green with this report.
The defence bases in the Middle East can be fairly Spartan, but they've had a bit of a festive makeover.
Just tried to make the place feel a little bit like Christmas.
From the Middle East to Afghanistan, it's starting to feel and look a bit like Christmas.
On this day in 1974, Cyclone Tracy tore through the top end, killing at least 65 people and leaving a harrowing legacy. Today marks 40 years since Christmas was irreversibly changed for those who lived through that night. Christy O'Brien filed this report.
It's the haunting sound of death, destruction and ongoing sorrow.
A cyclone has a sound, and it's not merely the sound of wind or the odd thump of something hitting the house. It's perhaps the most terrifying sound 40,000 Australians have ever heard.
On this day 40 years ago, residents in the small outpost of Darwin copped Mother Nature's full wrath in the form of Cyclone Tracy.
We spent the last 4 hours huddled on the yard outside the house, or where the house was. Had no protection? No protection at all. Just in the storm. And what happened to your wife? My wife was killed.
French national Leah Aitken had only lived in Darwin for a week when she found herself cowering with strangers after her caravan proved no match for the ferocious winds.
We were told that the bathroom was the safest place, so we put all the children in the bath, and there must have been 4 or 5 children, and so we had them all in the bath, and then the roof of the bathroom went.
When dawn finally broke, Darwin was a disaster zone.
It was an incredible sight. I mean, it was nothing. The houses across were blown away, and the car that we had come in had a big bit of wood through its windscreen.
Darwin looks like a battlefield.
It was a Category 4 cyclone. Mighty winds meant mighty damage. At least 65 people died and many hundreds were injured.
One woman, 73 years old, was found alive after being trapped for 4 days.
I remember sloshing through 6 inches of blood-stained water in the outpatients of the hospital. And it was absolutely filled. There were 500 people in the outpatients that morning.
People had to be moved in what was to become the largest evacuation in Australia's history. Planes were sourced from across the world.
In 2 days, something like 16,000 people were taken out of the airport.
Families were torn apart, and many never returned to the north.
To have had to go and be uprooted, I think that's part of the aftermath of the cyclone, of those sort of disasters that is very often forgotten. And of course there was no counselling in those days.
The deep scars weren't only physical. In a time of no counselling and a toughen-up attitude, many were left traumatised. But amidst the awful tragedy, stories of beauty and human spirit emerged. Leah Aitken found her saviours many years later, after a chance encounter in Greece.
He said, "Are you the people who got in my car?" Right. So there were these people. I found them again 38 years later. They're the people who saved my life.
At the moment, it's only guesswork, but experts estimate that it will take up to 10 years and cost more than $1,000 million before Darwin again becomes home for 40,000 people.
The town was eventually rebuilt, and many say reborn. But every wet season, Tracy hangs over the town as a reminder of the devastation cyclones can cause. Memories for some that will never fade. Christy O'Brien, ABC News, Darwin.
In cricket, Australian pace bowler Ryan Harris has regained his spot in the Test side ahead of the Boxing Day match against India in Melbourne tomorrow. Queenslander Joe Burns will make his debut in the match, coming into the side for the injured Mitch Marsh.
Many Australians spend Christmas morning at home, but the Australian cricket team spent this morning preparing for the third Test against India.
They might be more than 13,000 kilometres from their homeland, but nothing was going to stop these Polish sailors getting into the Christmas spirit.
Usually we have -10, -20 degrees and tons of snow.
There was a carol with a Hawaiian twist.
Mele Kaliki Maka is a thing to say on a bright Hawaiian Christmas day.
While the Russians taught a thing or two to a toy kookaburra. The forecast of strong southerly winds and choppy seas for tomorrow's start did little to dampen the mood.
Let's take a brief look at the national weather now. Thick cloud between northern WA, the Northern Territory, Queensland and New South Wales is causing some patchy rain and severe thunderstorms. The troughs in the east will contract upwards, causing showers in the tropics and much of Queensland to intensify tomorrow. A high will keep much of WA and South Australia dry. Tomorrow's forecast, showers and possible storms in Brisbane and Darwin. A partly cloudy, windy day in Sydney tomorrow. Sunny in Canberra, a few showers for Melbourne and Hobart with an approaching front, and a fine day in Adelaide and Perth. And that's ABC News for now. You can keep up to date on our website and, of course, on ABC News 24 and ABC Radio. Stay with us for the annual Christmas message from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth.